Welcome to the Grace Way, a program from Grace Baptist Academy. Each episode is designed to share the heart and vision of our school through thought-provoking conversations, biblical truth, and meaningful insight. Whether we are answering your questions, outlining our philosophy, hearing from our staff or other professionals, our goal is to strengthen the partnership between home and school, all for the glory of God. And now, here's your host, Craig Carpenter.
Alrighty, it's time for our final episode in our Helping Students series here on the Grace Way. Welcome back to the program. It was a wonderful blessing to hear so many reports of listeners to last week's episode. I believe it's one of the most important works that we've done so far in explaining the philosophy of our school when it comes to schoolwork. It was also great to be able to share some practical tips on completing your schoolwork as well as a spiritual perspective. Thank you to all of those of you who tuned in. What a wonderful blessing it was to hear of the strong listening numbers. Now, I will say one of the things about my personality is oftentimes I sit back and I kind of rehash the episode and see if I kind of communicated everything that I wanted to get across to the listeners. And one of the things I think really, when it all boils down to it, when it comes down to what a proper perspective of schoolwork really means, it really means that you understand the big picture. Every assignment is an opportunity to grow. Every assignment is an opportunity to learn more. And from another angle, another perspective, we would say it's not math. It's developing the real world and useful skill of problem solving. It's not necessarily science. It's about learning the intelligent design by which we were created. It's not necessarily history. It's learning from our past mistakes so that we can try to correct them and move into the future better equipped and better prepared. And so getting the big picture is a sign of a mature young person. And so to all the young people who work diligently, thank you so much. Thank you for those, once again, who are able to listen. But today's episode, we are going to cover how to set a schedule. It's the last episode in our Helping Students series. Next week, we'll have Pastor on, and he'll be doing a 3-part series. What does the Bible say about dating? Really looking forward to that. But today we're going to talk about how to set a schedule. Now, I'd like to start off by reading 1 Corinthians chapter 14 and verse number 40. 1 Corinthians chapter 14 and verse number 40. The Bible says, "Let all things be done decently and in order." Now, in this verse, it's not talking necessarily about setting a schedule, but the principle still applies that we need to get our lives in order. And everything in our lives needs to be done decently and in order. It's certainly something that we should all strive for and strive to live by. So to really start the episode, I'd like to ask you the question, do you think your life is in order? Is everything done decently and in order? I don't know about you, but from time to time, I think that answer changes. And in my life, some days it's like, man, I got it all together. And then the next day, you're just grasping at straws, trying to pull yourself up because you're a little bit behind and you feel a little bit overwhelmed. But one of the ways we can avoid that type of mindset, or one of the ways we can avoid that pitfall, is by setting a schedule. Now, I must admit that when I first taught how to set a schedule to the students here at the school, I approached it in a little bit more of a rudimentary or elementary format. And what I mean by that is I handed the students basically a timesheet almost, and it started at 6 a.m. and it ended at about 10 p.m. And in 15-minute increments, I asked the students to kind of fill in what they thought they would be doing at that time on those specific days. And so while that was a fine approach, really what it doesn't do, it misses quite a bit. And so what I'd like to help you understand is that if you set your schedule by priorities and you let your priorities dictate your schedule, I think we'll have a more successful and a more fulfilling day, and not just day, but also a more fulfilling week and a more fulfilling month, and carry that on into the future. Now, where did I get the material that I'm going to cover today? It actually comes from the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, written by Stephen Covey. And it comes specifically from the chapter, Put First Things First. I want to lead off here by talking about the essence of time management before I introduce what is known as the Eisenhower Time Matrix. And this matrix is supposed to help you identify what is urgent, what's important, what's not important, and what's not urgent, and really put all the things in that you interact with, whether they be things, chores, events, activities, whatever way you spend your time, your job, a career, to even when it comes down to eating breakfast, to put those into different categories, and we'll approach setting a schedule that way. So what is the essence of time management? Well, first of all, in order to be effective, you must manage your time well. And not only that, the most effective use of our time is to focus in the areas that are most important to us. Now, as we'll weave in throughout the lesson, the most important thing, of course, to me and hopefully to you and to the listeners on today's show and today's episode, hopefully the most important thing to you is that you are and behave and act like a Christian, and you do the things that a Christian should do. So is your schedule a reflection of your Christianity? Because, and here's really the thesis statement, and this is kind of the direction we've taken the last few weeks of episodes. I've kind of given a little bit of a thesis statement and we've worked from there. But a schedule is not just a plan for how to use your time. It is an indication of your priorities. And I believe we kind of talked about this a few weeks ago. But a schedule is not just a plan for your time or how to use your time. It is an indication of your priorities. Will you take a step back for a moment and just analyze your life and ask yourself, where is the bulk of your time currently going? Now, for most students, obviously that's probably going to be going into school. But if you think about it, you sleep about 1/3 of the week. So a lot of your time actually ends up going to rest. And so between rest and school probably takes up about 2/3 of your week, or close to that at least. But let me illustrate it a different way and give a different perspective. You know, God wants me to be a teacher and a principal here at Grace Baptist Academy and an assistant pastor at Grace Baptist Church. Therefore, the area which needs the most of my focus is on becoming the most effective teacher, principal, assistant pastor that I can be. You know, as much as I would like to read books about sports and watch events exclusively, quite frankly, that would not be an effective use of my time. Can you imagine the poor results that would come from participating in activities that did not help me become a better principal, a better teacher, a better assistant pastor? So, a schedule is not just a plan for how to use your time. It is an indication of your priorities. And without a schedule, I would argue that you cannot be effective. Now, there will be some people who probably disagree with me on that, and that's okay. But for the most part, and for the most, I would say the majority of people, the broad masses, they need some form of a schedule to really make the most out of your time. Now, some of you might say, well, I'm doing just fine right now, and I don't operate on a schedule. But what we're going to see throughout this lesson is that when we don't operate on a schedule, we limit our capacity for growth. And so what a schedule does is it allows us to kind of stretch minutes into hours and hours into days. And so we can get a little bit of an extra time boost if we're very careful, we're principled with our time, we're particular with our time, we're pointed with our time, and we use our time wisely. There are two areas of time management that we need to define, and then we'll get moving through the Eisenhower time matrix. The first is urgency, or the urgent matter of time. These are items that require immediate attention. These are usually urgent matters that are visible, they're popular, they're also easy to deal with as they keep us busy. So urgent matters, not a problem, but this is one area of time management. The other area of time management is importance, or being something that is important. This is results-oriented matters that require more attention, initiative, or, and get this because this is going to be the key, proactivity. So what I'd like you to do, and this is a little bit of an Easter egg for the episode, but I'd like you to do two things. And if the students here at Grace Baptist Academy do these two things, we'll make sure that they get a free A+ on the next quiz that they take. I'd like you to pull out a blank sheet of copy paper. If you need to pause the episode and go track one down, please go and do that now, not just for the free A on the quiz, but because I believe this episode and how to set a schedule will be more easily explained if you have a blank sheet of copy paper in front of you. That way you can kind of give yourself a visual as we go throughout this lesson. Now, assuming you've tracked down that copy piece of paper, there's one other thing that you're going to need to do at the end or for the free A on the quiz, and I'll explain that as we get down to the end of the episode. But for now, if you could, on that blank sheet of copy paper, go ahead and divide that sheet of paper into 4 equal quadrants. So basically draw a giant plus sign on the paper. Divide the paper into 4 equal sections. In the top left corner, put number 1. In the top right corner, number 2. Bottom left corner, number 3. And bottom right corner, number 4. Because we are going to discuss the 4 quadrants of the Eisenhower time matrix. This is something that was popularized at least by Dwight D. Eisenhower. And the first quadrant covers items that are urgent and important tasks that require immediate attention, such as deadlines, crises, or pressing problems. Now, before I take any steps further into what the Eisenhower time matrix is and how we can use it to effectively set our schedule, you need to know how to use the Eisenhower matrix. Anything that you have to do in your life can be run through this time matrix. You are going to decide which quadrant it belongs into. And then, based on the quadrant that you assign the specific project or whatever it is that you need to get done, well, then that is where it lands on your priority list when you create your schedule. Because remember, instead of approaching a schedule from the point of view that we look at a timesheet and we just write down the things we're going to do every 15 minutes or every 30 minutes, well, that kind of boxes us in. Whereas we schedule our time based on our priorities and let our priorities dictate how we spend our time, rather than the other way around. So quadrant 1 is the urgent and important quadrant. So if you're taking notes, go ahead and in this section, I want you to kind of write out urgent and important. And then I want you to also continue to write out the different activities and the pros, the cons that we go through and cover for each quadrant. So for quadrant 1, quadrant 1 covers things like crises, of course, pressing problems, deadline-driven projects. So this is like something that's an imminent project deadline. It's a health-related issue. Maybe it's an emergency situation at work. So for an average student, they're going to find themselves in quadrant 1 or facing a problem that belongs in quadrant 1 because of, procrastination. And we'll get to that more in a moment. However, for instance, let's say you wake up on Friday morning and you realize, I have an assignment that's due at 9 a.m. Well, it's 7 a.m. Now you have 2 hours to get that assignment done. Why is that assignment due, or in our school at least, the assignment was probably assigned on Monday and now it's due on Friday. And so why did you land with this assignment in quadrant 1? Well, it's because you procrastinated. It's because you put it off to the last minute. So quadrant 1 sometimes is because of other people. Sometimes it's because of an emergency that you're faced with, but also sometimes we can put items in quadrant 1 that if we had set a schedule, well, they wouldn't be in quadrant 1 in the first place. They wouldn't have become urgent and important. So that is one of the main reasons we set a schedule. So what happens though if we can constantly live our lives in quadrant number 1? If you're constantly waiting to the last minute to accomplish tasks, well, then every task becomes an emergency. And I don't know about you, but emergencies tire me out. Crises tire me out. Problems tire me out. And you know what? We have enough emergencies to deal with in our lives. We have enough problems to deal with our life. We have enough issues to deal with in our lives. But sometimes we create our own issues and our own problems, and we thrust different events into quadrant number 1 that really shouldn't be there because we have enough of them already. And so what if we're not careful? Stress, burnout, fatigue, the feeling that you're always putting out fires is going to drag us down. But that happens when we live in quadrant 1. That happens when we are always being faced with urgent and important tasks. Again, some urgent and important tasks are not avoidable. You can't avoid them. It's impossible. You just have to face it head on and grit your teeth and grin and bear it sometime and just deal with putting out the fire. But if you're always living like that, you are going to be stressed. You're going to burn out very quickly and you're going to be fatigued. And sometimes when those 3 things happen, stress, burnout, fatigue, well, that can lead to a myriad of different health issues and health problems. So we want to stay out of quadrant 1 as much as possible. Quadrant number 2 is really where we want to be. Quadrant number 2, and go ahead and write this down on your graph there. So now we're in the top right quadrant. These are items that are not urgent, but they are important. And these are tasks that require long-term focus and planning. So there are activities such as prevention, loss prevention, relationship building, planning, and then even some recreation. Now, I included this part, some recreation, because I think one of the mistakes young people make in their quest to be more efficient with their time is that they feel like they have to cut out all forms of entertainment, all activities, when that is absolutely not the case. We need hobbies. We need stuff to do. We need things to look forward to that don't have to do with work and the monotony of the daily life. But we could all admit that sometimes we do participate in too much recreation, or we do partake of too much entertainment. But I want to bring out this point that some recreation, some entertainment is not a bad thing. So don't feel boxed in like you have to eliminate all recreation and all entertainment to be a successful young person and to be efficient with your time. Now, what are some results when it comes to people who live in quadrant number 2 in the Eisenhower time matrix? Well, they have vision. They also are able to provide perspective, because when I am able to step back away from a problem or look down the road at potential problems, and I don't live in quadrant number 1 where I'm just rushing to put down every fire that happens. You know, when a firefighter goes to a fire, they are concerned really with just about one thing, as long as there's nobody actually in the building. They're concerned about getting the fire out before it spreads. That is their main job. That's really their only focus. But what firefighters don't often have in this scenario is they don't have perspective. They're not really worried about maybe the car that's parked in front of the fire hydrant. That's why you see the videos of when a car parks in front of the fire hydrant and a firefighter needs access. What do they do to the car? Well, they bust through the window, they bust through both windows and run the hose right through the car sometimes so that they can get water from the fire hydrant. There's no perspective because they are on one task. By the way, I'm not criticizing firefighters in any way for doing something like that. Don't park in front of fire hydrants. But the point I'm trying to make is still the same, and that is that people like firefighters, they're singular focused. They're not offered any perspective. And so what quadrant is a firefighter living in? They're living in quadrant 1. They're facing an immediate crisis, an emergency. Okay? So there are results of living in quadrant 2, results of assigning tasks to quadrant 2. You get vision, you get perspective, you also get balance. That ties right back into the recreation and entertainment angle. You're going to get balance in your life. You're not going to be work. No, you need some balance in your life. You're also going to have discipline. You're going to have some measure of control and fewer crises. Now, understand that I didn't say no crises, because we're all going to face a crisis in our lives. There's no doubt about it. But we'll have fewer of them if we do our best to look down the road. One of the things that I said, one of the activities of someone who participates in or tries to live their life in quadrant number 2, the urgent or not urgent but important quadrant of the Eisenhower time matrix, is that they're going to be preventative. Prevention is going to be a key aspect. They're going to be focused on ways to mitigate loss. They're going to be focused on ways to mitigate accidents and injuries. And so they're going to run across fewer crises because they're not so blinded by the individual moment that they are in that they can't look into the future. And so it really helps them. What are some examples of some results here? Well, how about daily devotionals? You're looking into the future. By delving into the Bible, you're giving yourself some perspective on life. Okay, how about exercise? How about professional skill development? These are all things that are long-term results. One of the things that we try to help our students understand, and one of the things that we try to ingrain in them, is that a mature student is thinking months and years into the future. Because when a 5-year-old comes to school, typically they're not thinking longer than the next 10 seconds. Or they're not thinking past lunch. Or they're not thinking until the end of the day when they can go home. They're only thinking about the next few seconds, or what are they doing now, or what pleases now. That's why they don't understand the consequences that they can face, and that's why they'll misbehave often. Boy, a student who is only focused on the here and now is going to be lackadaisical when it comes to their schoolwork and their studies. Why? Because, well, they don't have their mind focused on the future, and therefore they're not thinking about the future. They have short-term, a focus on the short term and not the long term. But somebody who tries and strives to live in this quadrant number 2, the not urgent but important tasks, is which they try to fulfill, they are going to be able to develop skills that will affect them long term, and they'll be focused on the long term. Thanks for sticking with me. We're going to go down to the bottom left quadrant. That's quadrant number 3. This is the urgent but not important tasks. The urgent but not important tasks. So these are activities such as interruptions, some calls or mail, some meetings, pressing matters. Okay, we all have urgent things that we're faced with on a daily basis, and we need to decide how important they are. By the way, I think it's relevant for me to mention at this time that sometimes what's not important to you may be important to somebody else. So it's important that you take a step back sometimes when a person brings you a problem, when a person interrupts your day, and you try to think about it from their perspective. If something is not important to you but important to them, and you kind of dismiss it as not important, you're probably going to find yourself in a little bit of a pickle there. You're going to find yourself in a little bit of trouble. And this is something that I personally struggle with. And certainly, this is something I talked about openly with our leadership students 2 years ago when we actually ran through this lesson. And this was the fact that, one of the things I do subliminally in my mind is that every time I'm presented with a problem, I immediately categorize it into one of the 4 quadrants on the Eisenhower time matrix. I was doing this before I even knew what it was. I just wasn't using it to its most effective use, but I'm still doing it. And so oftentimes, I would say, well, that's an urgent matter, but it's not important to me. So I would kind of just push it by the wayside. And that would get me into trouble with people. Because, like it or not, you cannot deal with people in terms of efficiency. People are not boxes to check. You cannot put down everybody's name that you need to talk to, and you can say, I'm going to talk to them for 5 minutes, and I'm going to check the box and move to the next person. It just doesn't work that way. You can deal with things in terms of efficiency, but you must deal with people in terms of effectiveness. And sometimes effectiveness means sacrificing some of your time to spend with another. It means putting others above yourself. So, what are some activities of the quadrant number 3, the urgent but not important tasks? Well, there are activities such as interruptions, some calls or mail, some meetings or pressing matters. But what are the results of living in quadrant number 3? Once again, we see a short-term focus. You're busy but not productive, and you're consistently and constantly distracted. This is a dangerous tier to find yourself in because, especially for a leader or someone or even a student, well, you're busy. You look busy. The person who lives in quadrant 3, well, they're going to get a pass for quite some time, even though they're really not accomplishing a very lot because they look busy. They're dealing with all the urgent matters that come onto their plate on a daily basis and on a weekly basis and or even going back down to an hourly basis or a minute by minute basis. And it's popular. They're the popular things to do. They take care of the nitty gritty that arises. They keep their inbox with 0 unread emails. And if an email has sat in the inbox for longer than 4 hours, well then, without being read, well then that's a problem in their mind. But all these things, they look busy, but really cleaning out your inbox is not as productive as most other activities. So we have to be careful that we don't always just let our lives drift into quadrant number 3. I think when we put our lives sort of into neutral, so to speak, this is kind of like quadrant number 3. You're just putting your life into neutral. You're kind of dealing with the things that you have to deal with. You're dealing with the things that you should deal with, but you're not really progressing towards the future. You're not really thinking long term. You're only focused on the short term. And again, we're trying to help you figure out how to set a schedule. So I'm asking you to identify every activity in your life and assign it to one of these 4 quadrants. Quadrant number 4. Quadrant number 4 is the quadrant to avoid basically at all tasks or at all cost. These are not urgent nor important tasks. They include activities like trivial or busy work, activities, time wasters. Again, we already mentioned that some recreation, some entertainment is not a bad thing. However, if it becomes to dominate our lives, that is when it most definitely becomes a problem. If you are living your life for the trivial and the busy work and the activities and the time wasters and the entertainment and the recreation, what are the results of that type of lifestyle going to be? They will be total irresponsibility. You're also probably going to be fired from the job that you're working. If you can't focus long enough to get the task at hand done, well, you're going to run into problems with your boss. And so you're probably going to be fired from jobs. People that cannot put their phone down are a problem in the workforce because there are things to accomplish. And remember, if we're not careful with our time, it's not that we can inherently live without a schedule. We can absolutely live without a schedule to a certain extent, but we limit our capacity. We could accomplish more if we spent our time wisely. And boy, how many times have you been on social media or something and you thought, I'll just open it up for a quick second, and before you knew it, a half hour or an hour had gone past. It's a classic example, but it's a very, very real one. So more results, fired from jobs. How about dependent on others for help with the basics? You can also combine with results from quadrant number 3. A person who is solely focused on participating in recreation and engaging in entertainment on a constant and regular basis has a short-term focus, because none of that entertainment and none of that recreation is going to get them to where they even might say they want to go. They might say they want to go to a specific place, but if they have not effectively categorize the activities in which they participate, they're not going to be able to set a schedule, and they're not going to be able to use their time efficiently and in a wise manner. More on this. So if we're going to analyze the quadrants, we've kind of already hit this, but effective people, first of all, stay out of quadrants number 3 and 4, because urgent or not, they are not important. They're not important. And then also we want to stay out of quadrant 1 because due to fatigue, stress, burnout caused by quadrant 1, minimal time should be spent there. You should only go to quadrant 1 when you absolutely have to. I'm not saying that you should never visit quadrant 1. You absolutely have to visit quadrant 1. You absolutely have to face emergencies and a crisis every now and then, but hopefully you've had enough foresight and you've had enough perspective and you've had enough vision to look into the future to hopefully help you have fewer emergencies, less crises. So, why? Well, spending the most time in quadrant 2 is the most effective use of our time. And why is that? Because spending more time in quadrant number 2 will lessen the use of quadrant number 1. And also because we're focused on important tasks, well, we're going to stay out of the dangerous, short-term focused quadrants number 3 and number 4. So how can we live in quadrant number 2? Well, first of all, if we're trying to manage our lives effectively here or efficiently here. And living our life in quadrant number 2 increases not only our production, but also our production capability. It expands our capacity. First of all, you have to base your life on sound principles. My number 1 role in my life is that of a Christian. Everything else is second place. But you have to base your life on sound principles. I hope you're getting your principles from the Bible. I really sincerely hope that you're getting the truths from the Bible, and that not only you're getting them from the Bible, but also that you're applying them to your life. You also have, and this is more of a kitschy quote, I guess, if you will, but it's knowledge of our personal mission. We might say as Christians that this is more of knowledge of what God's will is for our lives. Now, as we discussed in previous episodes, do we always know what God's will is for our lives? Absolutely not. Okay, I didn't find out until I was in 9th grade. I've spoken with many of our students, and many of our students, sometimes God does not even reveal his will to them or his specific will to them until after high school, until maybe they get some life experience, and then kind of God directs their path, and it's a beautiful and a wonderful thing. But you have to have knowledge of our personal mission. And going along with when I said you have to base your life on sound principles, but while God might not have passed on his specific will for you, for your life, He has given his stated will for every single individual. What are those things? Well, first of all, as we talked about in the How to Set Goals lesson, it is to be thankful for everything, to be grateful. We also found out that God's will is for all men to be saved. So there's many things in the Bible where God gives his commands, his principles, the things that he wants us to do in our lives. And while we may not know what our future holds, we can still live day to day, grounded in God's word, constantly in prayer with the Lord, and living as a Christian. Then lastly, it's a focus primarily on the important matters. What really matters in life? What's really important? That really should guide how we spend our time. Your schedule needs to be crafted around what's important and what's going to get you from where you are to where you want to go. Couple keys for setting a schedule. First of all, you must be intentional about where you spend your time. We spent this majority of the lesson trying to get you to understand how to categorize the different activities in which you participate. So that way you can schedule your time more efficiently. But at the same time, you can have a schedule, but you can also throw that schedule, that no matter how detailed it is, you can throw it right out the window and completely not follow it. You can just ignore it completely. So you have to be intentional about where you spend your time, and you also have to choose that you're going to follow the schedule that you've created. Then secondly, you got to base your choices on the relative worth of activities as compared to your values. If my number one value is to try to live a Christ-like life, well then guess what? The most relative or the highest worth of an activity is probably reading my Bible and talking to the Lord in prayer. And so I need to base my choices, I need to base my schedule on the relative worth of those activities. Number 3, you cannot prioritize what is on your schedule. You have to schedule your priorities. And I get that probably is a quote on a poster on a wall somewhere, but the principle is really the essence of the lesson. You cannot prioritize what is on your schedule. You don't look down at your schedule and say, well, I got to put that first because I scheduled that at 4 o'clock. No, you need to make sure that your priorities are taken care of first. Now, there is one exception to that, and that is if you've scheduled a meeting, it is appropriate, it is wise to honor the time that you set with another person, because now they've taken time out of their day and out of their schedule to meet with you or have a conversation with you. And so you need to honor that commitment. You can't just say, well, you know what, it's 4 o'clock. I know I had a meeting scheduled, but I'm an hour behind in getting my other priorities done, so I'm just going to push this person off. Rarely is that a good thing to do. Now, a couple other things I would think would help you, and that is you need to plan how you will spend your time on a weekly basis. Why do we plan our time on a weekly basis and not a daily basis or a monthly basis? Well, first of all, a daily basis puts us in a short-term mindset. We're only really focused on the day-to-day. And that's really more of what Quadrant 1's about. You're really focused on only what's going on today. You're only focused on the things that pop up today. And typically, that's where emergencies are going to happen. Because if you're not focused on, maybe for a student, in a student's case, what's due on Friday, well then, are you going to think about it on Friday? Are you going to think about it on Friday morning? Are you going to plan to think about it Thursday? No. How about we think about it at the beginning of the week? I know for some people, that means you need to sit down and schedule your week on Saturday night. Maybe it's Sunday night. Maybe it's Monday morning. But every week, sometime near the beginning of the week, I wouldn't go any later than Monday morning. And I wouldn't start any earlier than Saturday. Probably Saturday morning might be okay. But you need to schedule your time on a weekly basis, not a daily basis, because that really is not going to help us with any sort of long-term vision. Then you also don't want to schedule your a month out, or you don't want to schedule an entire month out, a very detailed schedule, list all your priorities, because those priorities are probably going to change a little bit from week to week and from day to day. It's just the nature of life. Things happen, and you have things that pop up on your radar. And this is one of the reasons that every time I enter all my assignments into my schoolwork so that the students and parents can view them, and I try to get, I might get a couple weeks ahead, and then all of a sudden, the very first day, I'll realize that I'm behind. And that's very frustrating, and I had to go and rechange it all. But a month is probably just a little too far out for you to be, use your time and be able to schedule your time effectively. But also, one of the things that scheduling your time weekly does is it gives you time and flexibility throughout the week to focus on long-term plans and goals, whether that be developing a skill set or working out or anything like that where you're trying to improve yourself. Setting a weekly schedule kind of helps with that. Then also, it helps organize your short-term schedule around your priorities. So for a student, what's your number one priority? Your number one priority is probably going to be, of course, after the Lord, your family. It's going to be your schoolwork. It's going to be your schooling. I've heard it phrased by many a parent that I believe that my kid's school is their job in essence. And I kind of get where they're coming from. A student's job is school. A child's job is school. And they need to learn how to do their job. So that's pretty much a crash course on the Eisenhower time matrix. But here's a few practical steps that I'll leave with you here. And then, like I said, to get the free A on the quiz, I know you've been waiting for what's the second thing you have to do, so I'll give it to you. But choose a planner or organizer that works best for you. So a couple practical steps. This is something that we've repeated often. But as a student, you have to figure out a planner, an organizer, a calendar, something that works best for you. How do you keep track of your priorities in terms of a schedule? So for some people, that may mean a checklist. I know for a period of my life, I went through kind of like I would write all the things I needed to accomplish, and then I would number them in order of which was most important to least important. And I would try to accomplish the tasks in that order. Because sometimes when we're lazy or when we're tired, sometimes we just focus on the easier tasks to accomplish just so we can have that feeling that I'm accomplishing something. But oftentimes those are the non-important tasks, the tasks that don't help us with our long-term future vision, plans, and goals. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do the right things at the right time. I think if you're tired, you do need to work that around your schedule. I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all, but just by and large, we need to plan and choose a planner and a schedule that works best for you. One of the things that you also need to do is you need to identify each of your roles and list at least one weekly goal that helps you accomplish your long-term goals for each. At the beginning of the year, all the students here at the school, and in conjunction with the episode we did on how to set goals, we gave the students an assignment where they had to fill out a goal sheet. They had to identify goals that they wanted to accomplish. One of the areas in which we encourage them to set goals is the area of multiple areas. We did not want them to be one-dimensional. We did not, as great as it would be, we didn't want to say them to write down 5 goals for the year, and that is A on a roll in quarter 1, A on a roll in quarter 2, A on a roll in quarter 3, A on a roll in quarter 4, and A on a roll for the year. That's not what we want. We want them to have a wide range of goals that help them and shape them and balance them to live the Christian life. So you need to identify each of your roles. So your role as a Christian. What's our goal as a Christian? Well, it's to grow closer to Christ. What about as a son or a daughter? Well, it might be something, and I know this is a bad goal because I'm using the word more, but it might be to help around the house more. Or maybe there's something this week that you want to specifically help your parents accomplish. Then, this is number 3. Identify your top priorities for each day. Identify your top priorities for each day. So, for example, for me, I have teachers meeting on Tuesday morning. So my top priority on Monday night is to make sure that I am completely prepared to walk into the teachers meeting on Tuesday morning, prepared to give the devotion, the announcements, and all the other things that are going to go along with having and holding a teachers meeting every Tuesday. Then plan each day around your priorities, which are based off your roles and your goals. So I know we've talked a lot about how to assign and how to prioritize using the Eisenhower time matrix. You need to prioritize the things that are not urgent but are important, because those help you focus on the long-term vision, planning, and goals. But you also need to base your priorities off of your roles and your goals. How many times have I used the example that my role as a Christian is going to dictate how I spend my day and the things that I try to accomplish during the day? Some closing thoughts. I've spoken quite a bit today. You're going to have to forgive me recording this on the end of a Monday. So forgive me here, but some closing thoughts. Your planner must be balanced able to help you identify what is most important in life. By the way, you should be constantly reanalyzing this. You need to reanalyze not only what you've written down, but you need to reanalyze the past. Not so that you can dwell in it, but so that you can best help yourself in the future. You only dwell and focus on the past so that you can help yourself become a better person. But you also have to constantly analyze what you have done, what you are doing, so that way you can better yourself. The second thing is your planner's got to be flexible. It is your servant and not your master, especially as this is a program designed for young people and teenagers and young adults. I would say that, if you're still living under your parents' roof, you're not in charge. You don't get to choose what happens on a daily basis. Your parents could come and say, well, today we're driving an hour away. And you say, but I had this plan and this plan. Well, I'm sorry. As a child, you have to submit and obey your parents. And so you have to keep at least a flexible schedule, a flexible planner. And I don't think any parents are trying to go out of their way to kind of stick it to their kids and try to mess up their schedule and whatnot. But I would also say, students, you need to sit down with your mom and dad and say, hey, I'm trying to, especially if this is your first time, trying to set a schedule. Will you help me? Will you guide me? Will you make sure this works in conjunction with your schedule? Because mom and dad, you come first. Lastly, your planner should be portable. You got to be able to bring it with you so that way you can constantly refer to it, but it's got to be able to be with you at all times. So that is a crash course in how to set a schedule. I know we spent a lot of time on the Eisenhower time matrix, and then I gave you a bunch of practical points. I hope you were able to write some down. But for the free A on the quiz, you have to write out the notes for the Eisenhower time matrix and stuff for the notes for each quadrant. But the second thing you do, and this will be attached in the episode description, but you need to fill out a weekly schedule worksheet. So it would really help if before I got into this part, if you pulled up this worksheet that we're going to put in the episode description. But this is a schedule that is, again, found in the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Then it helps you identify your priorities, your roles, your goals, and then the things that you have to get done this week. But first of all, in the top left corner, you're going to work left to right and then down here, okay? So it asks you to identify your roles. Your roles, R-O-L-E-S. So my number one role is a Christian. My second role is a husband. My third role is a father. My fourth role, I believe, as a church member is kind of a combination. And again, these are in no particular order, but assistant pastor, principal, and teacher. Okay, so those are all basically all my roles. And of course, I wear a couple different other hats in my life, but those are my main roles. Those are the roles that take up the most of my time. So next to each of those roles, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down the goal for each of those roles. The goal for each of those roles. Maybe as a father, that's to spend 30 minutes outside every single day with my daughter as the weather allows. Something like that. But I'm going to identify what I want to do to make the most of each of my roles. And then it gives you the 7 days of the week and asks you to list really your priorities in order. And so it gives you several blanks for each day. And so you need to identify what your priorities are each day. I would say for a Christian, the number one priority needs to be in the Word. But also for a Sunday, you know what my priority is? It is going to be to spend time at church. My priority, like I already mentioned Monday, after school, is to make sure I'm completely ready for teacher's meeting. These are for me, and I'm giving these examples and these illustrations in an effort and in a hope to help you. Then you're going to go down to the bottom left side, and you're going to see something called sharpen the saw. Now, sharpen the saw is another principle that's talked about in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But really, all you need to know is that this is really the super long-term vision you have for your life and what you're going to do to accomplish it. So I would like to be in shape so I can be the provider, protector of my family. So what am I going to do physically? Well, this week, I'm trying to work out at least 3 times. I want to do 3 workouts this week. So that's my goal. Then you'll see the other categories: mental, spiritual, social, emotional. Maybe the social goal is that you want to greet 2 or 3 new people at church and remember their names, something like that. But that is between you and the Lord and your parents. So I encourage you to fill that out. And then lastly, you have the appointments and commitments section. the appointments and commitment section. One of the things I told you earlier is that you have to base your schedule on priorities and what's most important to you and what the Lord has given you to do. But also at the same time, just because you're running behind on a certain day because something happened or something came up, you can't just shirk a commitment or an appointment that you made or push somebody off just because you're running behind. So those are kind of times that you kind of have to block out of your schedule once you commit to them. So if you're able to get me those notes and this schedule completely filled out, you're going to get a free A on a quiz. But students, understand that this is not just something we need to do for a free A on a quiz. This is something that we need to do to better our entire life. I pray that you'll use this lesson not just this week to get an A on a quiz, but to help you for the foreseeable short-term and long-term future. Because as we say so often, a sign of a mature student is that they see the big picture and they see a long-term vision. I pray this lesson helped you, and may we continue to walk the Grace Way together.
Thank you for listening to The Grace Way. We hope today's message strengthened your connection to both the Lord and our ministry. If you have any questions you would like to have answered on the program or would like to connect with us, please email us at thegraceway@gbaos.org. Until next time, let us continue walking the Grace Way together.